Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about the fright liver attack. This attack happens from White's perspective, and later on we'll see what we can do so that we do not run into White's plan of attack, and how we can have a drawish position by not playing the fright liver. So the fright liver attack starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and knight f6. This is called the two knights defense. And whenever this happens, the fright liver attack starts with the white knight that has been developed over f3 going to g5. Now you might be wondering that why white is moving its knight twice in the opening. This is a deviation from the chess rule that you should not move any of your developed piece twice in the opening. Once it's developed, just keep it there and develop the rest of your pieces. So instead of making any other developing move, trying to control the center or the central pawn over here, white is trying to move its knight to another square, and that is a knight move twice in the opening. So whenever that thing happens, you have to be a little bit careful about white's plan. So what is white's plan over here? If we notice closely, we'd see that this bishop at c4 is eyeing at the pawn at f7, and the knight is doing the same thing. This means that this pawn on f7 is attacked twice, but it's defended only once by the king. And if we don't do anything about it, this pawn would be captured on the next move, and that would come as a fork to the queen and the rook over here. So whenever this move happens, all of these things should come to our mind, that white is deviating from developing any of its other pieces, making a knight move twice, and trying to have an attack over this f7 pawn, which would be devastating. So the best way to defend this is pawn to d5. This way we are trying to block this bishop which was eyeing over this pawn at f7, and that's why the bishop has no way to attack this pawn for this moment, and that's why this pawn over here tries to take the pawn at d5. And now if you make a seemingly harmless recapturing move by knight takes d5, you run into the fright liver attack by the knight takes f7. This is very much unbelievable in itself, because white is sacrificing a knight over here and the king can take it. In fact, whenever this happens, that is the best move for the king to take, because the knight over here is not only just there, if you don't do anything about it, it can take either of these two pieces. So if you are not taking the knight and trying to save your queen by moving it over here, that knight is going to take the rook over here. So as you can see over here, this knight sacrifice does not come without any concession. This comes with a concession that you have to take the knight and allow me to keep on having my attack. And that's what black has to do as the best move in this position. So black takes it. And whenever this happens, then white tries to put pressure on the king and on the knight over here by a developing move, and that is developing your queen over here. What this move does is it not only gives a check to black king, it also attacks the knight twice. And whenever a piece is attacked more than the times it has been defended, it can be captured on the next move. So that's why, since we're seeing that it has been attacked twice but defended once, the knight over d5, the black king tries to defend it further by making this move, king to e6. Now we have to see that from a human's perspective. If we try to evaluate the position of black, this is a very uncomfortable position, because Look at white king, very much safe at the center, preparing to castle over here. And look at black's king, which is just about at the center. And that is the reason why, from a human's perspective, white keeps on attacking the king over and over again by developing its pieces. Although engine says that it is playable from black's perspective, but from a human's perspective, this is very much hard for black to keep on playing. So what white tries to do before making a castling move, it makes a developing move that comes with further attack on the knight over here. So knight c3. This knight c3 is a very good move in itself, because it is not only developing, but also this is trying to threaten this knight over here. So this knight is attacked 3 times and defended twice. So whenever the number of attack becomes less than the number of defense, number of attack becomes more than number of defense, it can be captured in the next move. So at this moment, black's best move here is to protect the knight over at d5 by playing knight to b4. This move is good, although the knight is moved twice. We can do that because white has moved one of its knight twice, and white is down a knight at this moment. At this moment, black can even try to give back one of the pieces so that it can get into a balance. But what white would try to do at this point is to create a lot of imbalance in the position, because white has initiative in this position. So notice that this knight does not only come with a defense over the knight over here, which is now being defended 3 times, so it's safe. It is also having an attack on this c2 pawn that could come as a fork between the king and the rook over here. So at this point, the best move for white is to save his king by castling. Now, notice that although this knight has been protected 3 times by the queen, by the king, and the knight over here, that's not enough. Because if black does not protect this further, the next move can come as a3, and if a3 comes, this knight is going to fall. That would be even worse. So that's why black tries to protect the knight over here by pushing c6. So this knight is now very much overprotected. So the only concession of black is that it is a piece up, and it is trying its best to not lose that piece, the pinned piece over here. But we have to understand that in fried liver, white's idea is not to take this knight over here. The main idea in fried liver is to make the king as uncomfortable as possible in the center, so that white has a lot of initiative to take and to create a checkmating pattern. So that's why white tries to open up the file over here by the move d4. So what is white's plan over here? White tries to open up this file. So if the knight, if the pawn is being taken over here, this file would get opened and this rook would come into play. So black never wants to do this, and black cannot even push the pawn over here because that could be taken with the queen or the knight, either way. So that's why black can become greedy and take this pawn, and if that happens, it is even worse, because although black is happy with the fact that this file is not opened, the other file can immediately open by white taking this pawn, and that's exactly white does. Notice that this rook is hanging over here, and the knight can take it. And white is not only sacrificing a knight, but also a rook in the next move for a very, very ferocious attack. So what white does at this moment is put the rook at d1. Notice that this knight is still pinned. So whenever a piece is pinned, it's as if that piece is not taking part at any of the game that black is playing at this moment. It's just being there, just working as a defensive piece and can be taken anytime. So whenever that happens, black tries to attack one of the attacking piece that is trying to attack this knight over here, and all black is trying to say that my piece is, although it's not sufficiently defended, I'm gonna take one of your piece in my next move if you take with the wrong piece. And that's what exactly white does. Although the white bishop is attacked over here, white takes with the knight over here, because this knight becomes much more useful in the game rather than the bishop over here, and it sacks the bishop. That's what the engine says that is the best way to retake this knight, not with the bishop but with the knight over here. So once this happened, now you can see why taking with the knight was so good. If you look at this file over here, this file is going to get opened with a check on the king when the knight comes over here. And as you can see that the king is on check and the queen is under attack. So whenever this happens, there are only a few moves and the king goes over here in that real game. And what white does here is not taking the queen because it has better moves. So what that better move is sacrificing another knight. And whenever that happens, you have no other good moves than to take this knight with the h pawn. And whenever that happens, white has a very good check over here that is slicing through the king, that queen over here. And in that real game, instead of king getting here, which would make the game a little longer, the king went over here, which creates a nice checkmate over here. And this is one of the ways in which you could have a very beautiful initiative in the fried liver attack and checkmate black. Now we'll go back to the point where we shouldn't have taken this pawn with the knight. So fried liver attack started with the knight that is being sacked over here. So instead of that, what we can do over here is that since our knight is being attacked over here, all we'll do is move this knight. And this move comes with the threat that if you don't do anything about this bishop, I'm going to capture it. And then the engine suggests that the best move is this, to check the king. And whenever this happens, you don't block with your knight, you don't block with your bishop. The best move is to block with this pawn, because this pawn would be recaptured by this pawn, because this pawn has gone all the way from this to this by taking pawns one by one. So it is trying to gradually make black down pawns so that this becomes very much good in the endgame. So the best move here is to take by the pawn and put this bishop into attack. And we have to notice that this bishop has no squares available in among these three squares. So it cannot stay over here, it cannot go over there, it cannot go over there. And that is a very passive move. So the engine does not like that. The engine suggests a move that is a little bit counterintuitive, which is bishop to d3. Notice that the engine even does not like the bishop to go back to its home square and the bishop to come to the e7 square over here. So if the bishop comes to e7 over here, then it would block the natural development of the queen through this diagonal, and that's why the best move recommended by the engine over this position is bishop to d3. And whenever that happens, black makes another move with its knight to have an attack on the knight over here that was ready to sacrifice itself. But now it cannot sacrifice itself because the white can easily take it and block it, because the bishop is not eyeing on this diagonal. So white tries to defend the knight by playing h4. Black tries to further attack the knight by playing h6. And the queen comes with a beautiful developing move, indirectly defending this knight, because you cannot take this knight. If you take this knight by playing this move, then white takes the rook. So instead of that, what white does, what black does is that since it is not being able to take this with a pawn, it tries to save the checkmating threat, because there was a checkmating threat by the knight and the queen over here if this square is not defended twice. So it does that, and after that we go into a very boring drawish line, but it's a draw is far better than a checkmate over the board. So it goes over here and tries to attack the queen, and there is nothing better than this repetition that the engine suggests. So the black queen and the white knight keeps on moving like this, and if you do it 3 times, it would be a threefold repetition and it would be a draw. So this is how you can actually avoid getting into the opening that is called the fried liver attack and have a drawish position. You can choose to not play this drawish line. So whenever this knight is attacking the queen, you can still keep on playing by not repeating moves and by moving your queen over here. That's fine as well. But this is one of the demonstration in which we see how we can avoid the checkmate and go into a kind of like a balanced position by not playing the fried liver attack. Thank you.